Morning all. In round 10 of the FIDE Grand Prix, Hikaru Nakamura was playing black against Mamedyarov 2-7-6-6. So very closely matched ratings. Nakamura's 2-7-6-7. So just 1 point in their rating difference. D4 from Mamedyarov. Hikaru plays D5. C4. C6. The Slav defense. Now white plays knight c3 here, and Hikaru takes on c4, which is okay here. Black is often playing this. e3, b5, trying to hold on to the pawn like this. It looks a bit strange, a little bit materialistic maybe. a4, b4, it's all been played before, but the usual move here is knight a2, or knight b1 or knight e4. This is one of the rarest moves on reference check that is actually played. Knight c e2. Okay, so knight c e2. Knight f6. One of the points, just before we move on there, is knight a2 is attacking both pawns, and there's a beautiful game actually of Colin Crouch that I'd like to show you perhaps soon after this game with the knight a2 move. So anyway, knight c e2, knight f6, knight f3, and now holding on to the pawn tenaciously, bishop a6, and there's a plan perhaps building up here just to grab onto that now and undermine white's centre. c5, trying to put pressure on white's centre. Bishop d2, e6, rook c1, and here it is. Nakamura is showing that actually he's going to be a real pain in this position and holding onto his pawn with the move queen d5. Wow. And black's doing fine, it seems, engine checking this game, holding onto this pawn like this. Knight e5, as though is there going to be some punishment, but it's weakening d4. As soon as this knight moves, d4's compromised. So c takes d4. So white's getting the c pawn back, but he's lost this pawn on d4. Knight bd7, bishop e2, rook c8. A lot of pressure on white. Bishop f3, queen c5. There's no tricks here that are working. This bishop's protecting the rook. There's no dangerous tricks just yet. b3, and now Nakamura plays bishop e7. Knight e2. Okay, and it could be quite dangerous to take here, giving white a strong initiative. And this is the kind of then it becomes more like a positional sacrifice. But Nakamura actually plays d3 here, so he's willing to give back his pawn in this critical situation. If we just did a quick check here on d takes e3, it might be giving white significant initiative. He plays one of the best moves, d3. So if he'd taken bishop e3, and all of a sudden, white's got some pressure here. So like d6 is eyed, it starts to look a bit nasty, in fact. So he does absolutely the right thing in this situation, it seems, to play d3, a willingness to give back the pawn and just trying to get some positional advantage. So knight f4, so he's giving back the pawn now, up to castles. Knight takes d3. So what's really happened though, how has he transformed that extra pawn he had? b4 is looking a bit vulnerable as well, but what about this diagonal? What about c4? He just moves the queen to f5 in this position. Okay, and it is a little bit tricky, in fact. What is going on here? Why can't white take on b4? For example, knight takes b4. Isn't that on the cards? Let's just check that as well. Knight takes b4, bishop takes c4, and let's say rook takes, knight e5. and this is interesting for black, this position. If say castles, rook d8, you can see that there's a lot of pressure on white's position, and this looks uncomfortable. Okay, the knight looks quite awkward there, especially. So it's a tricky position here after queen f5. We see e4, another pawn sack, both trying these pawn sacks all the time, but e4, is this really that convincing? It's snapped up by Naka, again going a pawn up. And now an odd looking, kind of weakening looking move, g4. But when someone 2-7-6-6 plays it, there must be a good reason for it. Queen d5, Queen e2, and now Nakamura just supports the knight with f5. White castles, and now, okay, in this position, engines think black is doing great in this position, and in fact, an engine continuation is taking on c4 with the bishop. And for example, like this, Queen d4, and this is pretty nasty. This Queen d4, black's going to be playing stuff like Knight c3, and it's pretty dangerous stuff, because then, well, let's see, in this position after Queen d4, there's numerous threats. If bishop takes b4, bishop takes, knight takes. Here, knight e5. Okay, so 5, and there's a lot of pressure here. Okay, but in the game, remarkably, Naka actually in this position played the move rook takes c4, and to quite a lot of people's surprise, Mamedyarov actually resigned here, when actually, you know, he's only like maybe he's like just one pawn down worth. If we do an engine evaluation here, it's just basically like what being one pawn down after taking. Bishop takes c4, although it's unpleasant. We have knight takes b4 here, attacking the queen here, getting an exchange of queens, and there still seems to be a bit of a fight in this game. As though it's too terrible, this sort of position. You see minus 0.69, so it's less than a pawn still. So this is on this last move that was played here. Bishop takes c4 is really strong, but rook takes c4 was played. Rook takes c4, which isn't as strong technically, but Mamedyarov, he clearly, apparently, he miscalculated. He thought it was worse than it actually was. I mean, 3 pieces for a rook or something instead of 2 pieces for a rook, strangely, or in his calculations. So I think he miscalculated here and resigned. And apparently there's some discussion actually going on about this at chessgames.com that it's not the first time. He seems to sometimes get disheartened from being slightly worse, and sometimes resigning prematurely. Although obviously with a rating of 2.766, he must be winning most of his games against everyone. But he just here against Nakamura, he just, I don't know, was disheartened and didn't want to play on here with being worse. So it was a quick win for Nakamura here after rook takes c4 on move 22 with the black pieces. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.